Yes, you're welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome today. My name is Kwame Gonza, and I'm here with my brother, even though he's quite in the dark today. We can't see him very well, but I think everything will be okay. As you are seeing the topic today, we want to reflect on President Ramaphosa's visit to Washington, where he was invited by President Biden. This follows the back-to-back visits which happened a few weeks ago by the Secretary of State of the United States, who is like the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the United States, Blinken, who was in South Africa. From South Africa, he went to Rwanda, and then he went and visited Congo also. And in all these places, he was able to measure the beat on the ground. He was able to measure what Africa is thinking, and from the look of things, it doesn't look very good for him. Let me prepare my camera a little bit here. From the look of things, it looks like things are not very good. Even when you look at the response of the Africans in South Africa, Madame Pando was able to push back because Europeans were going ahead to bully Africa. So she was able to make this very clear to Blinken that this is unacceptable to us as Africans. And when he went to Rwanda also, it's the same situation that they were able to push him out from there. So I think the United States is coming to understand that Africans are not going to be pushed around. And so they are using all types of methods to coerce Africa. And, South Africa is being looked at as a leader because of its economic power on the continent. So in that aspect, they think that if they coerce South Africa will coerce other, they will convince other people on the continent. And I think that era, which, they lived in of plundering the earth and causing chaos all over the earth, I think the era is gone, but they are still stuck in that, era and in that mindset. So we want to look at this situation and understand what is in this visit for Africa, because this is not only a South African visit. This visit by President Ramaphosa to Washington, because we understand that for the last 8 years, no South African president has visited the White House. So this visit has taken a lot, and it's for various reasons. So my brother Titi, you are very much welcome. Welcome to our audience. I'm very happy always to have you here. And you can greet our audience and then give us a background on this situation as we are talking to Africa. We are talking to the whole African continent.
Yes, thank you, Gonza. Thank you, my brother. And allow me to greet the audience. So, it is a pleasure to always be with you. You know that whenever we sit down to have these discussions, we try to, and it all started geopolitically. From a geopolitical perspective, where is Africa and what is Africa doing? And right now, we are just confronted with a geopolitical, it's more like a geopolitical play, which is on the world stage.
Absolutely.
And there are certain scenes which are happening, and
let me interrupt you a little bit. Do you think that do you think this situation is similar to the Cold War that happened during the Soviet era? Because during that time, that era which took people like Patrice Lumumba, when he was killed by the imperialists, the United States, of course, Britain and Belgium, Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown. Do you think this period is very similar to that Cold War era, when there was the fight for the soul of the weaker nations or the global South?
You see, it's there is an author who writes that the more things change, the more they remain the same. I think it's George Orwell. We are in a permanent state. There is nothing different today as compared to the Cold War. It has always been happening. I mean, I was just looking into the WikiLeaks library. If you check the WikiLeaks library, you will see that the geopolitical play is always the same. It's imperialistic. Right now, the US is the imperial power, and they will do anything. No wonder it is only their international relations. Diplomats who are actually at play. Their ambassadors are very operational on the ground because they are trying to push the will of the empire. So we are still having the same tag that we had back then. It's a geopolitical play, and for us to actually go and overlook it, it becomes detrimental to us. So it is very vital that we sit down and we really consider, we face the fact of what is happening, we consider what is happening, how is it different from ever before, because our leaders are still dying. We can look at Magufuli, we can look at uh, who passed away in Burundi.
Uh, Burundi,
Yes,
Nkurunziza. He was called Nkurunziza.
Nkurunziza. Yes,
Burundi, yeah.
Nkurunziza. We can
and
look
and
at,
and, and even the Haitian president also,
yes, yes,
he passed away in dubious, and then
yes.
some people have been saying the United States was the one which backed that coup because it has been disturbing Haiti for a very long time.
Exactly. So, and remember that was in Haiti. It was basically a man they imposed on the people, and now when the man started to serve the people, it was another thing. It was then it became a tag. So we are still at that place whereby you look at what interests are being served all over the continent. I mean, all over the continent of Africa, all over the world. Whose interests are being looked after? And we have actually discussed the fact that the United States goes out of its way to actually ensure that, and they are always saying it, they're always preaching that it is their interest, the interest of the United States, and that is what basically advises their international relations. Their foreign policy is advised by a selfish set of interests which only looks at their people. I don't think the interest of the United States is solving hunger in Africa. It's not that. They've got other interests which, well, of course, not communicated, but we will see them as we go through the article. We will see what they actually want to push. And I think we can also look at the media to say, what is the media not telling us? Because they will tell us some of the information that is up open for discussion, but there are some salient facts which, when we step back to look to observe, we see that this is what is happening. But then the media is not going to tell us that because they also want us to focus on a specific narrative.
Do you I thank you very much for that, my brother. Do you find that SABC News and News 24, these networks have been of service, especially when it comes to the African people, when we are talking about South Africa? And then in addition to that, what do you think, do you know of the specific interests which the United States has in South Africa specifically, putting aside this issue of Ukraine and Russia and what is happening in Russia? Do you find that you have some information specifically on what the interests of the United States are in South Africa?
Let's start with the media, what the media is doing. I have an acquaintance on Twitter who is on a permanent state that we need to consider seriously that the media is owned. Like, if we can just consider, step back and look at the media, saying that the media is owned, they are capital, they are there for profit, and who are they saving? Are they actually communicating information as we'd expect SABC to tell the people the news, or are they saving the interest that exists within the media space? And then you will find that most of the time, what they tell us is, how do they serve a specific narrative? How do they attract advertisers? How do they make profit? How do they make it a point that their ratings are there? And I think we've seen that Prof. Anya is refusing to go and be interviewed by the British journalist. I forgot his name a little bit, because she has realized that they are using her. They want to use her for ratings, for because the spotlight is on her. So that's where they're going to get their news headlines. Uh, when it comes to how the US will go and negotiate, there is a story about 4 years ago. Is it 4 years ago? South Africa had done something. It had to do with AGOA. There is a program in America called AGOA, and I'm just going to quickly look at African Growth and Opportunity Act. So it's an act of parliament in America, the act of their parliamentary houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The African Growth and Opportunity Act actually serves trade. It's about trading. Who is made part of that act, who's excluded, who gets what and who doesn't get what. So that is what a tool that the US uses to make it a point that what their interests are basically served. Because what happened a couple of years ago, South Africa wanted to stop importing chicken, and then according to the tenets of the act, it was said that no, if you are going to stop importing our chicken, we are going to exclude you from everything else. And which I really understand. Each and everyone at some point will have to serve a specific interest. But ours is to not uh, let's not be naive thinking that these things happen on a superficial level. Over and above the things that are actually published by the media, there are stories which are sublime, which don't get to be mentioned that much, which we basically have to ignore. And you will see when you read through the article that, wait, the things that I'm worried about, the things that I'm concerned about, are not necessarily what is in the story. So for you to actually get the story and beyond, you need to actually do some further research to say, over and above what the Associated Press has written, what is actually going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, yes. Thank you very much, my brother. Thank you very much. I want us to to look at this article very well, which actually sparked my mind, and I said that no, we have to talk about this situation. In this article, which was published by the Independent, the news or the media house is called the Independent, which is based in the UK, and this Independent, I consider it a neo-colonial mouthpiece. And in it, they are saying so. In this in this article, they have actually, from my opinion, they have captured their concerns very, very well, and what they
Yeah,
expect from President Cyril Ramaphosa, and they have pushed it out there. And what is going on, from what I understand, is a lot of anxiety in the West, because many people have been saying, "Oh, the West is declining," and these things now, to me, they look more real today. If you look at people who wrote books, like people like Ray Dalio, who wrote a book called the changing world order, how nations rise and fall, principles of understanding the changing world order. So he said that the United States actually is declining, and this is a very powerful economist and one of the richest people, in the world. And so there is a lot of anxiety in the United States, especially in the ruling class, the corrupt ruling class people. I'm talking about people like Biden. These people are elected with money. People who just come in and bribe, and they have these guys elected, which of course they call lobbying, but that is corruption. They bribe them. And so
yeah,
this, it reflects these media houses which belong to them. I'm talking about all over Europe and the United States, Australia, Canada, and all these articles, they publish them, but in reality they are reflecting their anxieties, what they think,
yes,
what they expect, from the world. So in it, they are saying that presidents Biden and Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, are set for White House talks on Russia's war in Ukraine, climate issues, trade, and more. And so we want to break down this article, whether it is really about this issue. Is it really about the Russian war in Ukraine? this issue, is it really about climate issues? This issue, is it about trade? Really? So we want to go in detail and understand this thing very quickly. So the article is saying that the United States President Joe Biden and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa are set to meet Friday at the White House for talks on Russia's war in Ukraine, climate issues, trade, and more. Ramaphosa is among African leaders who have maintained a neutral stance in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with South Africa abstaining from a United Nations vote condemning Russia's actions and calling for a mediated settlement. Now, my brother Titi, we will go. I will reach a point where I will pause, and then we will break down, these paragraphs to be able to give
I think
the people who are viewing a clear picture. Let me come to you. So so that we can give our viewers a clear picture of what, because there is a lot of people who don't understand, what is written in these things, in these articles. So we want to break it down for them so that they can understand the concerns of the imperialistic camp, the neo-colonial camp, the camp which wants to continue to colonizing the world and exploiting it and grow fat while other people are dying of hunger. So South Africa's international relations minister Naledi Pandor said Ramaphosa would emphasize the need for dialogue to find an end to the conflict during his meeting with Biden and in separate talks with the Vice President Kamala Harris. Pandor added that the issue will be South Africa's focus when it participates in the annual meeting of the United Nations General Assembly next week. We would want a process of diplomacy to be initiated between the two parties, and we believe the United Nations must lead. The United Nations Secretary General in particular, Pandor said. Now, we are seeing, my brother, what we are seeing here is that, let me zoom in a little bit here so that our people can be able to see these words very well. Can you see them, bro?
Yeah, I think you bring them up a little bit.
Should I zoom them a little bit?
Yes. Yeah.
You can see them there?
Yeah, that's visible.
Is okay. That's great. So what we are saying is that, what the article is saying is that they are going, at first they said they are going to discuss Russia and Ukraine, which is of course understandable as we are seeing what is going on in the world, climate issues, which I don't believe that they're going to discuss climate issues, and the trade. I don't know which kind of a trade that the United States has these days that, I don't believe they are going to talk about trade. I do not believe that they are going to talk about climate issues, because the United States itself is sending massive weapons, plenty weapons into Ukraine and cutting off the gas from Russia so that Europe can start using firewood. Europe, they have started even using firewood and coal. So I don't believe they are going to talk about climate issues. This is a lie. For the trade, I don't think the United States has any new products which can sell around the world, in new industries which can establish around the world. And so I believe that this is not about trade. So it would be more about United States' desire to influence the African continent on the issue of Russia and Ukraine. Now, Ramaphosa, they said, is among the leaders who have maintained a neutral stance. And the United States, from my understanding, and from our understanding, is that it thinks that the continent of Africa should follow everything it says. The United States and its, and this ruling class, the regime in the European capitals and the Western world, believes that Africans should continue to pander, to its aspirations, of continuing to colonize the world. This is what I see when I'm reading this. This is what I see, because they want us to address their concerns. But recently, our presidents went to Europe with the Netherlands to attend a climate adaptation, summit, and the European presidents did not show up. And when you tell us that we are talking about climate here, and our people came to talk about climate, and you did not show up, it makes me, question your version of climate change,
Yes.
of climate, issues. And she, the minister of, of international relations, who's the minister of foreign affairs, Naledi Pandor, of South Africa, has emphasized, and the government in South Africa has emphasized, has continued, has been firm in its conviction that the crisis in Ukraine should be mediated, not weapons being added. And that has been the position even of the African Union. And I think that it is time for the Africans and the African Union and the African heads of state to continue to be firm that the United States, not only to say that this conflict should be mediated, but I believe that the president of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, should emphasize that the United States and Europe should stop sending weapons, to Ukraine, because it is causing more destruction. There's
Yes.
no reason to continue to fuel the conflict. So I believe that the African continent and the African heads of state, they need to be firm on this issue. They need to be
Yes.
firm, not only to say the conflict should go to mediation, but that the United States should stop, first of all, should stop sending weapons. It has to stop sending weapons. That is when we will see the negotiation, because Russia is willing to negotiate, but the United States thinks that they should not negotiate. They want to beat Russia and defeat it. They want to bomb Russia and defeat it from Ukraine. Certain videos are even circulating on the internet, and we have seen that the United States military, they are already inside the country in Ukraine. They are fighting. You see?
Yes.
So videos have been circulating. So my brother, what is your take on this paragraph?
Let's start it where you actually touched on the fact that the independent mainstream media is a tool of the imperial machine. Because there are calls, however faint, however vague, and at times very elaborated, very elaborated very clearly in certain corners of South Africa and even in Africa and the world. There are calls for Ramaphosa to resign. And I see how the Associate Press here has found a way to write an entire article without actually touching on that one, because it is like a mammoth. It is like, to use the word that is being used, it's an ankole cow in the room, because the president has been it is said he has been caught with his proverbial pants down because of some dollars which were found at his farm, at one of his farms, and they purported it to be proceeds from game. He said it himself that it was proceeds from game. He is in game, he's selling animals and everything, but it was 4 million. It's rumored to be 4 million. No one is contesting the fact that it's 4 million. That fact is nowhere to be seen here. And you and me know very well that if the interest of the US, of the imperial machine, was not being served by President Ramaphosa, they would have led with that. The entire media spectrum would be talking about it every day. I know I personally don't watch mainstream media. I mean, I cannot really comment on what the SABC is reporting on. I seriously watch it periodically. But then what happens is that I know that when the West want you out, one of their tools is the media. How they are going to pressure you with the media, how they are going to make you an international pariah. Which president with such a cloud hanging over his head would be invited to sit with the leader of the free world to discuss issues as salient
No.
as this?
The so-called. The so-called. He's not the leader of the free world. The so-called free
Yeah,
world.
the so-called
Because
leader
remember,
of the free world.
we have 1 million Africans in the United States who are in prison. People of
Yes.
African descent. These are Africans. They are in prison. So those people are not free, even though they
Yes.
constitute just less than 13% of the population, but they are 50% in prison. 1 million. So I don't think it's as free as it is said.
the purported leader of the free world would not actually find himself sitting with a person who has that cloud over him. It's dollars actually. The US is actually having a set of questions, should be questioning us to how did dollars end up in South Africa. They are said to know where each and every dollar is. We had 4 million just here in South Africa. Now, when they are not saying that, let me touch on the one issue that is up for contention, because my some of my friends are actually very worried about this visit, because they are looking at it as a lame duck president going around making deals. What kind of deals would those be? And when we look at the issues that they're saying, no, these are the issues that are going, let's specifically look at them discussing what is going to be said with the case of Ukraine. Because you, like you said, it's the US that is empowering President Zelensky to actually be this extravagant about war, be this colossal idiot, really, when it comes to using his own people as, cannon fodder. Now, what is happening is that we also need to take two steps back and actually study exactly. I have not yet studied it myself, but if we were to actually just listen to Russia, because we have not listened to Russia, we don't watch Russian TV, we don't watch Russian news. When we consider Russian news, it is an announcement from the president every now and then. But then, really, what is the special military operation that Russia is carrying out in Ukraine? I do believe that that is communicated. I tried searching for it. It was not readily available. But I know that the objective of why is the Russian army in Ukraine, no one has ever tried to answer that question. Did Russia just wake up in the middle of the night and decide that we are going to take over the world? We all know and we are certain that is not what happened. What really happened? We can go back to 2014, 2008, when Ukraine and Russia actually was acting unilaterally. Ukraine was doing things. Russia was was basically giving warnings to say, no, look at Ukraine, look at Ukraine. We were not looking at Ukraine at that time. When Zelensky was still a comedian, we were not looking at Russia. When the 2008 Mariupol Euromaidan, Euromaidan uprising, color revolutions, when all those things were happening, Ukraine did not matter to us. Why is it that now Ukraine matters to us? I have said it before on, I think it was on Facebook. I wrote a very long text of saying that those who profit from war are the most evil among us. Those who profit from war are the most evil among us. I know that all the nations of the world have a Department of Defense, and not even one country has a Department of Attack. That just shows us what kind of people we are. But then it's the weapons that keep on flowing into Ukraine. Those weapons are not
By
free.
the way, let me interrupt you. By the way,
Yes.
The United States at its formation in 1776, actually, its current Minister of Defense, or whatever Secretary of Defense, they were not
I'm
calling
not
it
sure.
defense for defense. Yeah,
I'm
at
not,
first, when it at its formation, they didn't call it defense for them. They used to call it for war. Even the
hold on,
secretary,
hold on, hold on. There is some break in the network. I'm not sure if it's on my side or it's on your side, but then there's some sort of break.
I can hear you. It is breaking a little bit from you, but I can hear you very well.
Okay. All right. I think, yeah, you were coming like in breaks there, so I guess you can
Okay.
repeat yourself.
Yeah, it's possible that we have disturbance in network. But what I was saying is that at the formation of the United States, actually it had a secretary of war. They never had for defense. So all through many years for them, they used to
Yes.
call it not ministry of defense, not secretary of defense. They call it ministry of
Secretary of
war.
War.
So they knew from the start that they are going to engage in this domination, to continue the European domination, the European tradition of causing war and colonizing the world. And so they went all the way, to Philippines to try to colonize Philippines, South America, Latin America, all of Latin America, Cuba. You see how they are continuing to disturb Cuba, disturb Haiti, disturb, all the way, disturb Diego Garcia. Those islands which belong to Africa, and they have been taken over by the United States, and they have been given to it by Britain. You see what it is doing in the South China Sea, all these Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan. So it was originally for them a ministry of war. It was supposed to be secretary of war, not necessarily of defense. So for me, I'm not surprised when they go about behaving the way they are behaving.
Okay, yeah, I think we've hit the 30-minute mark on the live, so I'm gonna say my last words of trying to bring it all together, and then I'll take.
No, let's don't worry. Let's summarize it real quickly, and then we get on with it.
Yeah. So here's the thing.
Pando,
there are two things. There are two things from my perspective. Firstly, from a South African perspective, President Cyril Ramaphosa sitting with President Biden is a very dangerous game, because Ramaphosa is on his way out. He is really being pressured by his own party, by his own people, to actually resign. Even the white monopoly capital in South Africa has actually broke rank with him. They have started. There is Rob Herzog, who was one of the families that actually funded him, is going about a white billionaire going about around saying that he should be gone, he should just resign. And then there is the issue of the industrial military complex in the United States. That complex, that war machinery who profit each and every time there is a defense contract, or the US is donating aid to Ukraine. They are going to push for a war to continue. They are not interested in a negotiated peace, a settlement. They are not interested in that. For them, it is to push as much money as they can get out of it. By the time you guys start negotiating, they will have made their billions and they will be out of there. So when you look at those two, and the fact that the minister herself is actually having a conversation with them through the Council on Foreign Relations. Minister Pando in the United States is having a sit down with the industrial complex, the military industrial complex champions of the CFR, Council for Foreign Relations. That is the people that she's talking to. So what we need to take out of this is the geopolitics of it, and how it's lame ducks who are actually having that discussion. President Biden himself is being said to be surpassed by the former president Donald Trump in some of the polls that are being run with regards to who will be standing for president come the next election.
I think I totally, I get your point. I totally get your point and what you are saying. What I'm saying is that South Africa is going to be, I think, taking up a position, its temporary position at the United Nations. No, it's going to be participating in the United Nations General Assembly next week. And I think all the nations are going to be participating. What I see is that Pando added that the issue will be South Africa's focus when it participates in the annual meeting of the UN General Assembly next week. We would want a process of diplomacy to be initiated. So what I'm seeing is that the United States is trying to influence South Africa so that South Africa can in turn, influence the other African countries. Actually, it is not trying to influence, but rather it is trying to coerce South Africa, with all kind of methods, because they use different methods, intimidation, coercion and all that. They use a lot of methods on these leaders, when they want something from them. During Biden's visit, Pando accused the United States and other Western powers of focusing on the Ukraine conflict to the detriment of crises around the globe. In particular, she pointed out what is happening to the people of Palestine. We as we are with what is happening to the people of Ukraine, she said we should be equally concerned to what is happening to the people of Palestine as we are, concerned about what is happening to Ukraine. So this was her statement, during the recent visit by Secretary of State Blinken to South Africa. And this is, for me, this is a very legitimate concern. If we are talking about that Ukraine should serve its sovereignty, then in the same spirit, we should, be concerned about what is happening with the people of Palestine, that Israel is causing mass genocide, of the Palestinian people, and occupying and colonizing these people and causing apartheid, carrying out apartheid and killing innocent people in Palestine. But the United States is in support. And for me, this doesn't surprise me. The fact that the United States has a history of supporting dictatorial regimes as long as they are serving the so-called interests of the United States, the interests of the United States and the European interests, which is the colonialism. Of course, the interests of the United States, which it doesn't talk about what are these interests. The interest is colonialism, to continue to colonize the world. So it is willing to impose, bad leaders on countries. You can talk of the Mobutu Sesekos and support those types of leaders. Or you can talk about what happened, in different countries in Latin America, that brutal leaders were imposed and they killed people, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. But the United States was in support because these kind of ignorant leaders and brutal leaders were in support of the interests of the United States, which interest is colonialism. And so this is what we are seeing, that the United States has, and the Europeans have lost all legitimacy of talking about things like freedom, things like human rights. They have lost all legitimacy because they are
Yes.
the ones, they are the same people who are sponsoring terrorism. They are the same people who are carrying out brutal killing of people, attacking innocent countries around the world, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. They are, Somalia. They have been attacking since 1993. We can talk of, Vietnam. So they are the ones who have been killing numerous people. Like 1 million people died in Iraq. So we should be concerned about these, and these people, we should dismiss them as people who are not qualified to talk about things like that. They are not qualified to talk about things like climate change. Okay, so I think that this is the position from which, as Africans, we need to stand firmly. The Biden administration, meanwhile, has sought to underscore that Russia's blockade of Ukraine's Black Sea ports has led to scarcities in grain. So what they are trying to tell us is that Russia's war in Ukraine needs to be fought with more weapons in Ukraine, and then try to convince President Cyril Ramaphosa and convince the other Africans that Russia's war is the one which is causing a lack of grain and whatever, cooking oil and fertilizer. So this is like telling us that Ukraine is the one who supplies food to the whole world, which is another lie. This is another lie that I think that it should not be believed. And the other thing is that information came out recently that of all the 87 ships which left the Ukrainian ship, the Ukrainian ports, only 2 came to Africa. 85 of them went to Europe and the United States. So it turns out that Africa, when we are talking about the Black Sea and
Okay. I think your network just got interrupted there. So to keep it going, the grain issue, we know that the grain that left the Black Sea port was not for the
Africa
benefit
does not
of the
need
third
as much grain, in trouble of suffering, from hunger because of not receiving grain from Ukraine. Because when we look at the data, it shows us that 85 ships went to Europe and the United States, and only two came to Africa. And this is very disappointing. South Africa's neutral position is largely because of the support the Soviet Union gave during the Cold War era, to Ramaphosa's African National Congress in its fight to end apartheid. South Africa's regime of repression against the black majority that ended. It was, we are talking about the apartheid era. It was a regime
Yes.
which was there that ended in 1994. South Africa is seen as a leader of the several African countries that you will not side against Russia. And this is history itself. Actually, is I think is a good service to us. History is there for us to examine. The Soviet Union and Russia, together with China, they have been supporters of Africa against colonialism. Let us go back and examine our history and the books. So it is not the United States to tell us who we should support and who we should not support, who we should be against, because we are not idiots as Africans. As Africans, we understand our history. We know the history. The United States was on the side of apartheid. We understand that President Reagan was on the side of apartheid. Even when they told him that he should support the African National Congress and support the liberation forces in South Africa, he decided to support the forces of apartheid. So the United States all along, it was on the side of imperialism. It was on the side of colonialism. It was supporting Portugal. It was supporting the apartheid, Portugal in Angola, all over. It was supporting, because it wanted to take over the position of the European countries which they were occupying during colonialism and become the new colonial empire, of course, which it became. So I think that the United States is not in any position to lecture Africa or tell Africans. And I think that the president and, President Cyril Ramaphosa and all the other African, heads of state have to be firm. They have to stand firm and resist this kind of coercion, blackmail, and lies that are being spread. Because we know the history. Let us go back and examine the history. Let not Biden or any president of the United States or any foreign minister from the United States or secretary of state from the United States tell us what we are supposed to do with ourselves as Africans, or which country to talk to. Let history tell us. Let us examine history and see who has been on our side. Okay. So despite the differences on the war in Ukraine, the Biden administration recognizes the importance of strengthening relations in Africa, as China has spent decades entrenching itself on the continent's natural resources markets. Improving relations with South Africa, one of Africa's biggest economies, is central to the United States effort. John Stramalu, an international relations expert in the University of Witwatersrand, said the talks underscore that the United States sees South Africa as the potential, as having the potential to lead Africa in a constructive way on trade and other issues. White House Press Secretary Jean Prey said the two leaders would also discuss climate change and opportunities to increase trade and investment. Harris and Ramaphosa will discuss global health, security, space cooperation, and other matters. I don't know whether Africans are present at the international space, the so-called space international, international space station, where they stopped China from going, and where Russia withdrew recently. So if they stopped China from participating, China, who is an economic superpower, from participating in the international, space station, and then Russia withdrew from that international space station recently, then how are they going to be discussing with Africa to participate in the, in space matters? So I consider this also, a very, very big lie. South Africa's ambitious efforts to transition from coal to cleaner energy are expected to be discussed during the leaders' talks. The United States, Britain, France, and Germany announced a plan last year to provide 8.5 billion in loans and grants. So this one is also a lie. So the Britain, the United States, France, and Germany, they don't have money. First of all, they are struggling themselves. They have huge problems. Germany and France, they have already started switching on coal plants, and the United States is supporting them in polluting the environment, and they are the biggest polluters of the environment. And the United States has continued to support them to block off the gas which is coming, the cheap gas which is coming from Russia. So how can they be discussing climate change with South Africa at the same time? So this is, this comes up also as a lie, which is unbelievable, in the eyes of sensible people who understand. Ramaphosa could also raise with Biden the failure of the United States and other wealthier nations to make good on more than decades-old pledge first made in 2009 and reaffirmed at the 2015 Paris climate talks. to spend 1 billion to help developing nations deal with climate change. So this is what we have been talking about, that they pledged in 2009 $100 billion that they will help Africa to fight against climate, to deal with climate change. At the same time, they are switching on coal plants. So these are the lies which we have said that we must not, as Africans, I think, fall for these lies. We must not at all fall, for these lies. What is what is central to the Europeans and what is central to the United States is the continued colonization of the world, because they see that power which they have been having and that grip on the world slipping away, and they think that Africa can continue in this direction to support this colonization. And I think that we as Africans, we need to firmly stand against this. We need to firmly resist this and concentrate and pay attention. All our attention should be focused on building our continent and building a unified African government, a unified African country for ourselves, so that we can stop this exploitation that has been going on for a very long time. I don't know what you say, my brother, your concluding words.
Well, because you were touching, like, the way you were finishing it, and given that you were touching on the pressures that the US wants to put on our leaders, what is going to be the remedy against that? The remedy is unity. If African presidents right now were acting in one accord, no one fell out the other one. The US or the Western world would understand that Africa act one. Now, ultimately, we need, in the words of Osagiev, we need one representative at the UN who's going to vote the African way, because even if you the vote that we referred to earlier, the UN vote against Russia, it showed that the Western world was being cornered. It was in their own corner and they were feeling the pressure. That's why right now they have to go around changing. Those who abstained are to be turned into yeses, and those who voted no would rather abstain. So all those pressures which are being placed, and we've seen that African countries voted in a way that was not expected by the UN. I mean, like, Congo voted against the UN because the US, I mean, because Congo realized that, wait, okay, the UN is not doing anything for us. Mali voted against, Gabon voted against, Algeria voted against, this Burundi voted against, because they were actually seeing the long-term effects of saying that why do we perpetuate a war which is just killing people and enriching a very select few. So now when they are having this discussion, it's about peace. How do we find peace wherever we are right now? Why can we stop perpetuating the genocide that is happening, the killings that are happening? Let's stop perpetuating that. Let's find a position of peace. And according to the US, that is a naive position, by the way. According to the people in the US and the propaganda that is being pushed by the Western media, when you say peace, you are naive.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, all people who are watching. Today we wanted to, discuss and reflect on, President Ramaphosa's visit to Washington, where he was invited by Biden, and we saw that we as Africans, we need to be firm in our understanding that we need to stand together, as my brother Titi has said, that we need to unify our efforts and send only one representative at the United Nations. We need to stop wasting our resources like what we are doing, duplicating and then being unproductive in this manner. And this is going to take the effort, the participation of all youth across the continent and in the diaspora. And when I'm talking about the diaspora, I'm talking about all people of African descent, as Nkrumah said. These are Africans, regardless of how they have been renamed and termed the different names, African Americans, Jamaicans. These are all Africans. So all of us need to participate in the effort of liberating Africa completely, so that we can rebuild ourselves a strong nation, just like what our ancestors did, that they came together all over the world and they built the continent. They came and rescued the continent from exploitation, from the evil of colonialism. And so the same way in the same way that our enemies, our historical enemies, have continued to scheme around that they came back with neocolonialism. We need to fight it, to the end, and rescue our continent and take it all the way, for ourselves, for the benefit of, of all Africans first, all around the world. So we want to thank you. And so we come to an end. Thank you, my brother Titi. Until we meet next time. Africa must unite.
Africa must unite. And also, anyone who's listening, can somebody ask Mumia Abu Jamal why he is in prison still? So I just wanted to throw it out of context. There is a man named Mumia Abu Jamal is in prison. Somebody would want to just ask or look into his case. Thank you.
Yes. He has been in prison for the last, I think, for since the 80s. I remember since the 80s and the 90s. Yeah. Anyway, bye-bye, everyone. Africa must unite.
Africa must unite.